Freshly pressed on Smooth 98.1.
Studio, mics are
Choose
up.
the innovative and
Good morning, Lagos. You are tuned in to Smooth 98.1, and you're welcome inside of Freshly Pressed on Smooth Breakfast with Valentine.
And Folu?
Right now it's 7:30, so it's time for us to delve into the newspaper stories and go into detailed analysis for the headline. Joining us for a second day running, he's still in town, Cheta Nwaeze. He's also known as Chickster up on Twitter. Good morning, Cheta.
Good morning. How was your night?
It was nighttime.
I knew you always wanted to off my microphone.
Sorry, what? About what?
New day.
Referring to what? That you asked how was your night? I don't like that statement. It's not a real question. We've also got Ikemesit Effiong, who's back in the studio. How are you doing, Ikemesit? How's
Very
that?
well.
Excellent. Good to see you back in the studio.
Sure.
Please find him up on Twitter as at Judge Ike. And we have got Fred Alison in the studio. Good morning, Fred. How are you doing?
Good morning.
Excellent. He is on Twitter. I finally got his Twitter handle correct. Mr. FB Alison is where you can find him. Now, as we go into the stories, remember to join us with your comments, share your thoughts. We always welcome them. And you can do that by tweeting at us. Just use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981 or by sending in messages to our WhatsApp number, which is 080440981.
We start with the story from Daily Times newspaper this morning. Lagos, according to this report, the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, Justice Adamu Audu or Abudo Kafarati, has directed justices of the court to stop granting interim ex parte orders in any political case brought before the courts, as well as directing them to step up, the proceedings for cases that are still pending in court ahead of 2019 elections. Cheta, what are your thoughts regarding this story, seeing that this might reduce the time it takes to reach a verdict on cases?
On the surface, it's actually a good order. One of the problems that we've had with the judiciary over the past few years is that political cases, especially after elections, tend to clog up the system. However, like most things, there should be a bit of nuance to it. Maybe first we should define what an ex parte order is. An ex parte order is an order made on behalf of one side by one party without recourse to the other party. So, for example, if me and you are dragging for Folu and I want to have the upper hand, I can go to courts and then, without you knowing, just get the judge to grant an order, forcing her to follow me.
And it's temporary.
I was trying to understand.
Okay.
Because this is borderline
Ikemesit
this
and,
horror story that's going on in Bechebe
Ikemesit
community
and,
at the moment. Please.
Ikemesit and,
Let's not sell human
Folu are
beings.
lawyers, so they will have whether it's temporary is another matter. However, the nuance that I'd like to talk about is this. Sometimes ex parte orders can actually have their uses. So, as an example, August 8th this year in Ekiti, the chap, Kolapo Olushola, that's his name, that lost the election. He was appealing the results, and the bailiff tried to serve the application to Fayoshe and the APC being the respondents, and none of them were available to be found. According to the bailiff sworn affidavit that Fayemi had left the country and that the APC office in Ekiti was shut. So in that respect, the judge now gave an ex parte order so that they could begin hearing the election petition. If we go back to 2015 in Abia State, INEC, when there was an appeal against the election results there, INEC refused to release the election data sheets, and it was an ex parte order filed by following an application filed by Ojius Okalu that compelled INEC to release the data sheets, so that's where people could actually begin tribunal process.
Yeah.
So when you look at these two examples, you see that the ex-parte order actually has its uses. The issue, I will agree with the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, is that in many cases it has been abused. So what we shouldn't be looking to kill the fly with the sledgehammer. We should be looking to find insecticides to spray the fly.
All right, but seeing that we have over 191 cases that are still pending, and the judge is asking them to conclude all these cases before October, do you see this as possible? Have less than a month to October.
It's possible if they sit down, but what I say is that
191,000 cases.
if see, one of the problems with the legal system in the country, 191,000, I think that's a typo. But
Carried over from last year.
I think that's a typo. But 191,000 political
I assume
cases.
it's 19,000.
Yeah. Now, I think it's definitely a typo, but that's the point.
Maybe they
Is
mean
one of
total
the
cases.
things that is sorely needed in our judiciary is somebody else to help the judges take records.
Yeah.
A stenographer.
The stenographer, yeah.
With these
Ideally, an electronic one.
Very, very important.
No. You could need to also get rid of those wigs and gowns.
Let's move on now to
Don't
this
be
next
angry.
story. Oh, by the way, it's very important to note that he's also asked that they establish an alternative dispute resolution center so it can aid other judges and courts to see that cases are treated as soon as possible. Now, moving on to Vanguard newspaper, I have this next story. The headline reads, "We're seeing more patients with hypertension in Lagos, and doctors are lamenting this. They've raised the alarm over rising cases of high blood pressure and other hypertensive disorders.
Fees.
And they are leading not to school fees, but to a traffic situation in Lagos, the traffic jams." What do you think, Fred?
I was surprised that this was actually news.
Why? Have you never experienced traffic in Lagos?
No, this
okay.
is like part of. I'm surprised I'm not even one of the patients. Like driving in Lagos, it's a headache. They attribute it to road constructions and trailers parked on the side of the road. So that's obviously fair, and the sad to say, but the roads in Lagos have deteriorated somewhat, right? in the last few months, years, and that obviously causes a lot of road traffic and issues. And then the drivers, so I see it like this: like you have the least I don't want to say educated person managing a heavy equipment for something that really affects like the economy, because trying to get to where you need to be, right? It's almost like sorry to say, like how we hand over to our government to folks that are.
So another point, I was going to raise a point to you to consider as well. Looking at Lagos as a metropolitan city that should be, it's in most cases compared to other developed cities in the world, don't raise your eyebrows, Cheta, but shouldn't we adopt certain systems in Lagos, adopt the system of, how do I put it now, working from home, people having to operate outside the business locations, just at least to improve the health standards of their staff?
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually do that a lot, actually, working.
But will the employers allow that to happen in Lagos?
I'm the employer.
Forget employers. See, when I was
so
managing a newspaper at a point, there was a time that I tried to institute this, work from home, so that everybody was saying no light. Forget. Okay, come back to the office.
No light, no data.
No, forget the data. Everybody said no light. Okay, come back to the office.
Okay, you even think like things like carpooling and things like that will reduce. But when you look at the perpetrator as someone driving a bus filled with people, so sometimes that's why I used to console myself. Like, okay, he's coming in front of me and he's acting crazy, but at least he's carrying to pull up people. So he's carrying more citizens than me trying to get somewhere.
So he should get priority.
That's what I used to console
That's
myself.
That's
What I used to console myself.
And that's why he's not an hypertension patient.
And
The bus driver
for
trying
me,
to muscle you out.
for me personally, the call, like when Madam sent me a message 2 weeks ago, hey, remember school fees? Now that is a cause for hypertension.
Thank you very much for that, Fred. Let's move on to this next one from Punch newspaper. And rather scary news, or rather information actually, which they're receiving. This Punch report has it that Boko Haram has killed a nurse and threatened to murder Leah Sharibu. And they're given a month, just 1 month's notice. They're saying that the government has not responded to their calls, that they've been trying to reach out to the government authorities, but nobody's saying anything. And they released the video where the murdered nurse at the back of the head is actually, instigated.
It's an execution.
Execution, yeah, like just trying. It's very worrisome. And looking at this story, Fred, I mean, how do you think the government has been treating cases like this? And seeing this report coming in and this recent, occurrence, doesn't it put a question to how the government is pursuing the release to see how all these captives will be actually set free?
Yeah, it really does, and it's frightening because, as you said, this is like also shows a sign of desperation. They want to be heard, or they want to be considered serious. I think they should be dealt with, in a military way, But regardless, like. The story also says, like, the head of the International Community of Red Cross was stating that these people are doing selfless work, right? And they're only going to this area because this area has become more populated with people running there, for safety, so it's supposed to be a safe haven. And obviously Boko Haram sees this as an opportunity to attack, and, so it speaks to some other things that Cheta has said something before, where there are like the perception publicly is that we're in control of this battle against the Boko Haram, but they have more territories under their control than we the public know. So speaking to all of this, I think it's the government really needs to step up how seriously they take the lives of their citizens, right? And I don't know what's the best solution when it comes to dealing with, kidnapped citizens, whether it's negotiation, what it is though. But obviously you can see that right here they feel they need to take this very aggressive step, to bring the government to the table for negotiation.
It's a point to note, though, that the nurse who was murdered in this brutal manner, her name is Saifura Kosa. She's a midwife, reported to have been working with. Yes, she was just the one that was, killed in this case. Reported to be working with the International Community of the Red Cross, and they threatened her other colleagues, and of course Leah Sharibu. Let's move on to this next story now from Guardian newspaper. The headline reads, Unease over stolen jets at Lagos Airport. So, two Bombardier Dash 8 Q300 aircrafts, formerly used by Top Brass Aviation Services Limited, a local operator, have been allegedly stolen in Lagos. They said the airplanes is actually apparently like 50-seater airplanes that were leased to this company, the Top Brass Aviation, from Seagold Investments. It's involved in a tussle. Now, they took the case to court after the lease was granted for $12 million. A 30-month lease tenure was granted to this company. They got that, but they said other parties tried to, get into this case, tried to muscle them out of it or bully them out of the possession of this planes, of the lease agreement that they already signed with this company. Cheta, what are your thoughts on this?
I think this is one of those stories where the newspaper didn't do its homework thoroughly, and as a result has ended up creating more of a perception panic, as it were. The jets were not stolen; they are at the aero hangar just a few feet away, and I mean that much is there in the story, and a lot of people have actually been digging. There was this gist going around, and there's some credence to it based on what is in the story, that the owners of the jets are owing hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees. Yes. So the jets were essentially seized, and in order to get their comeuppance, as it were, they planted this story. As in, basically they leaked it, and I can easily see how that will happen. A story that looks hot gets leaked to a journalist, and the journalist just runs with it in an attempt to break a story. The part of the story that really gets me worried is and given the bad regulatory environment that we currently have, in the very first paragraph, there was a line that said, some interested parties from the presidency, however, acquired the aircraft contrary to the orders of the Federal High Court in Lagos. I mean, just dropping that in Wedo without any supporting facts to it makes the whole thing look very tabloidish and very frightening. Apparently, the owners of the planes are trying in the process of trying to release the whole thing. Is it release the other what word I should anyway to
Acquire.
are trying to that Air is trying to acquire
Acquire.
it from on a new lease
Yes.
from the owners, that kind of stuff. And then the people, the what's their name,
Top brass.
Top Brass Aviation, and are trying to fight that. So it appears that Top Brass are owing, and these guys have decided. So the whole thing has gone to court. We probably should wait until the outcome of that. Although yes, there's that fear that our court cases take forever. But this thing of that, it's very bad. I mean, if you go further down the story, stakeholders are worried because of the alleged failure to protect investors' investments, uphold the rule of law, and making all of these prospective flags to investors. These little things matter.
Thank you very much. We've got messages coming in up on WhatsApp. Tony says, good morning, guys. I'm all for this high blood pressure in Lagos due to traffic. It is hell on earth and has turned me into a road raging monster, he says. Well, we have Ayade who says Aja is just terrible in the evenings and it's caused by irresponsible driving when bus drivers simply park on the road and private drivers drop people off in the middle of the road. Then people are now selling stuff all around you. Really, the frustration is real and palpable. And Ian says... will someone tell me that the nurse wasn't murdered just the way he just debunked the news of the stolen jets? Nigeria is in a sick state. Curious. I don't know how that relates, Ian, but thanks for your message. We move on. We've got this one in from the Premium Times. Nigeria declares a national disaster as floods have killed over 100 people. Looking at combined affected states of Kogi, Niger, Anambra, and Delta. 40 people alone, or 40 people died in Niger State alone. Very worrying numbers we're looking at here, Ikemesit. And we know that NEMA does tend to put out, and the flood agency tends to put out advance warnings, but there needs to be more than just warnings to prevent this unnecessary loss of life. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, before we come to that issue, just worth noting that 8 other states are also being monitored. Taraba, Adamawa, Kebbi, Edo Rivers, Benue, Bayelsa, Kwara. And when you look at essentially what the states have in common, they all closely track the floodplains of of both major rivers in this country. Yeah, the rivers Niger and Benue. Yeah. When you look at the fact, I think NEMA, the zonal coordinator in the Northwest Zone said we're probably looking at a situation where this came from the Hydrological Services Agency, which essentially said that both rivers have almost reached levels that resulted in the massive floods of 2012, which for our listeners who may not remember, they began in early July and lasted till November of that year. They killed 363 people, displaced about 2.1 million people, according to NEMA. It affected 30 out of all the 36 states in this country, and the estimated economic loss from those floods was put at 2.6 trillion naira right at the time. So to your question about doing more than advanced warnings, what we would probably require in order not to have a situation where every so number of years people are displaced because of the seasonal changes in weather patterns would be a radical reordering of how we live in the country, right? In many parts of this country, because irrigation and modern tools and modern techniques of agriculture are at best at their nascent stages. People have to live close to the river, essentially, right? And a lot of these communities are resident in the floodplains that closely track either the major rivers or the tributaries of the major rivers, and so it's
and
really,
you
really
can't
hard.
change what a floodplain is.
So exactly, right? And you can't change how it functions, right? So short of moving people out of the way, which, considering all of the structural and systemic and human and economic challenges we have in this country, would be piling up yet another social pressure point on us. There's really nothing, right, that you can do save to develop agriculture.
But yes, developing agriculture, and that'll be a longer term solution. But since we have got to a place where these warnings do come along, perhaps just mini evacuations to prevent loss of life, because at the end of the day, the loss of life and then secondary economic losses are issues. Cheta, do you want to answer that specifically?
Not that specific.
Okay, because for time reasons.
Yeah, I understand. But there's also the problem of discipline. If you go to Ijibu, for example, there are places just by the canal.
Yeah.
As in, you see you'll actually see some of these houses, the water line is on the walls. As in, each.
And they don't listen.
And they don't listen. So.
And to your questions, mini evacuations work best when you have solid infrastructure.
Thank you very much for that, Ikemesit. All right, moving on to slightly more light-hearted news. I think this is a little bit entertaining, I think. INEC prohibits the use of mobile phones and cameras during Osun elections. ThisDay newspaper covers it. We have seen it in social media. Some people have been ranting, saying this is a violation of our rights. But essentially, the INEC boss, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, explained that voters would not be prevented from using their devices at polling units, but they will be banned from holding their cameras and telephones once ballot papers are issued and until they cast their votes in ballot boxes. They say this is to reduce the risk of vote buying and selling, which has been, I don't know why they say a new development, but it's not new, but perhaps it's become a bit more aggressive. Ikemesit, what are your thoughts?
INEC is essentially playing catch up. So what's the really amusing part about this is that when you go further down in the story, right, INEC essentially announced that they've launched what they call an iReport app, which, shout out to one major television station in this country, probably should be filing, I don't know, intellectual property. Infringements, actions. But essentially, this iReport app, fun fact, allows the citizens to report wrongdoing and malpractices, including the aforementioned new developments, vote buying and selling. Now, do you know how this application works? It works by allowing ordinary voters and citizens to submit reports via text messages and, surprise, surprise, pictures. So the question then becomes, how do people get to submit pictorial evidence? Because
no, come on, you can do this before you get to the polling booths, even at the polling booths, but before ballot papers.
But we know that the vast majority of malpractice is from experience. Cheta has been at polling booths. I assume we've all voted here, right? He's been an observer, I've been an observer. We've reported on this for various media organizations. We know the vast majority of malpractices, if they don't happen a day or a week or two before, they happen
on the day
during actual voting. So, and if you look at 2015 and you look at the flood of citizens' reports on social media about incidents that were going on all around the country that the media and INEC and a lot of the election observation groups were not able to track, but citizens were able to report on, you're simply saying, if we're trialing this in Osun, and I imagine that INEC will probably not walk back on this in the lead up to the main elections in 2019, you might have a situation where essentially people cannot act as that final check on election integrity in the country. So this is something that I'm not sure INEC has clearly thought through, but let's see.
It could be like an exam room. Just don't bring in your phones. Just leave it outside. Let's carry on with the next story. Cheta, the ICPC has stopped the investigation into Adeosun certificate forgery, according to the Punch newspaper. They said, according to Mr. Okudua, and he sent the ICPC, Mrs. Okudua, and she sent a text message in response to inquiries by the newspaper agency, saying that we stepped down the investigation into the matter so as not to duplicate the efforts of another agency which had taken it up. They did not specify which agency. NYC itself had done an investigation. They've sent their reports, they say, to their supervising ministry, which is the Ministry of Youth and Sports Development, and have washed their hands off of it, saying, well, if you want any further questions, go and meet them. It's no longer in our hands. What are your thoughts on this, Cheta?
Correct me if I'm wrong. The only agencies that can take over from ICPC is EFCC or police, Abi. So is it because, so it's EFCC doing this or is the police doing this? Because one of the problems we have in this matter is that mentality that too many people exhibit, oh, she has resigned, so leave her alone. In other parts of the world, in saner parts of the world, you finish the investigation, submit the report, let it be acted on. Anyway, Yes. Can we move on?
We move on to our next story from the New Telegraph newspaper. Evans gang members have been jailed for 82 years for kidnapping and armed robbery. We're looking at 41 years in prison each for two of the gang's kingpin. I mean, it goes on into quite a fair amount of detail as to what took place. But I'm going to go to you, Fred. What are your thoughts on this story?
It's about time. It's about time. I'm just wondering what's taking so long for us to get to Evans. There's not much to say here.
Yeah, 41 years. So it's a good amount of time. Let's see if they deserve it all. And we've got comments coming through up on our social media platforms.
Yes, on Twitter we'll have this one from Mr. G Quest. He says, no surprise there that there is a rise in hypertension. The city is stressful, adjudged one of the worst cities to live. Driving on the roads feels like you're on a roller coaster ride with potholes. Please pay regular visits to your doctors. Hypertension is a silent killer. We have this other one here from Yinka. Yinka says, why won't there be high blood pressure? I live in Ikusi and I'm heading to Festac. I decided to follow a relay, and over there you wonder if the CCECC builders are mad. Okay, go through the airport toll gate. There you have traffic caused by construction. Let's try Oshodi, and you have crazy people carrying out construction there. Or going to Ekbedanko. Around that area, it's on lockdown, and Dr. Mo asks it's just insane, and we claim nobody is working. Why won't people have high blood pressure? Is what he asked.
We've still got more messages to go through up
Yes.
on our WhatsApp.
Solomon from Akoka says, INEC is trying to prevent voters having evidence that they have voted for a particular party and thereby get paid for it. The policy is to discourage vote buying. And Comrade Ifenuga says, I disagree with INEC. A lot of shenanigans happen at the polling units. Phone camera and video provides evidence of malpractices such as ballot snatching, box stuffing, compromise by both electoral and security officers. I have been an electoral observer and I know a lot of things that happen.
All right, and in our final story, we've got this one in from the Premium Times. Nigeria needs 959 billion naira to eradicate open defecation by 2028. UNICEF has put this statement out, and we had talked about this a few weeks ago, saying that we have real issues with contaminating our water sources.
Yeah.
I think in the world we're like number 8th ranked or something in terms of polluting the world's oceans, and this is just looking at plastics, and then we have open defecation to deal with as well. Ikemesit.
Where to start? Okay, so first the statistics, right? According to UNICEF, 1 in every 4 Nigerians lack access to basic toilets and therefore defecate in the open, which depending on your of what our population is anywhere from 40 to 45 million people. 39% of Nigerians use improved toilets not shared by more than one household. So the vast majority of Nigerians have access to some form of sanitation facilities get to share. And only 37% of, and I think this is probably the more jarring one, only 37% of health facilities in this country have at least one usable toilet for patients.
The health facilities, people, let me just repeat that.
Wow.
As the hospitals.
As in the hospitals, the places where you're supposed to go to have something of a guarantee that you would be in optimum shape health-wise. Only 37% of them in this country have
usable
one
toilet
usable
facilities.
one
Sorry,
usable
one, not
toilet.
multiple.
Yeah, so why is this important, you might say? According to the World Health Organization, ending open defecation is an indicator used to measure progress towards the 6th Sustainable Development Goal, which was this thing that all the nations came along in 2015 to agree to, that they would achieve by, I think, 2030 or so. And the 6th goal talks about guaranteeing access to clean water and sanitation for everyone. And development experts have shown that extreme poverty and lack of sanitation are statistically linked. Now, what the 5th highest ranking country in the world in terms of folks who do not have access to proper sanitation facilities, only India, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Ethiopia rank ahead of us. So this is a serious situation, right? And this is something which you can count off of the back of both your hands how many policymakers, how many people who are in charge of creating policy. You're thinking, for example, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, or whatever it is that is called. I think since 1999, that's been the most renamed ministry we've had. You're thinking the Ministry of Health, you're thinking even anecdotally the Ministry of Education. Almost no one is saying anything about this, and so it makes sense that UNICEF is highlighting these facts. Worth noting, though, that the government's contribution in UNICEF's estimation, right, is only about 234 billion naira, but the total cost for Nigerian households in order for us to begin to deal with these issues is put at almost more than double that. So it's
Thank you very much for that, Ikemesit.
sobering all
And
around.
we've come to the end of Freshly Pressed for this morning. Thank you to everyone for joining us. You can find our analysts up on Twitter. We have tweeted their handles. Just search with the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. We'll round up with Mr. G Quest, who tweets and says, INEC isn't applying a blanket ban on phones from polling areas. The ban only applies once you pick up the ballot paper and you are about to vote. So maybe you will pocket the phone or hand it over to somebody else.
So hold this phone for me.
And Ifama from Ikoyi says, please can the government agency stop wasting our money on a wild goose chase? Adeosun, please. Not even sure why she resigned. Why is there no search for the forgers of the document and NYC 2? As for the open defecation issue, we are on a long thing. The government is not interested. We are poverty's number one care. Sorry. All right, keep listening though. Coming up next, Ilbliss will be in the studio for the Grapevine. It's Entertainment Time at 8:15.
I'd like to know, can we use the
Visit
vote for like
cars45.com.
fertilizer?
You want us to read out something they didn't tweet at us?
No, it was actually
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
it was actually tweeted at you. It was a sad story.
if judiciously,
what
if
story?
judiciously
Sad
managed
story.
for
Yeah, the guy
where
had
people are
spent 3
defecating
hours
in rivers,
like,
traffic.
you know, yeah, in work water sources. So
now
exactly.
controlling.
Yeah, interesting. Funny enough,
Hashtag.
like,
What they have for you?
Okay,
basically, I think it was in 2014 when I was in India when the government, Narendra Modi, when initially
Yeah,
came in,
so
launched
just another
this
example.
drive to get more Indians
Thanks,
to
Daramola.
defecate in the open, and the cultural backlash was
Alrighty.